So we're going to continue looking at the painting by Christie, the scene at the signing of the Constitution of the United States. And we're going to go back to these same essential questions that we've been working with for the last few days. The first one, how does an artist use his or her craft to reveal a political message? Remember yesterday we talked about different techniques an artist can use. Who can remind us some of those techniques we talked about? Yes.
Lightness and darkness.
Yeah, the use of light and dark. What else?
Emphasis on a certain point.
Good. Yes.
Detail.
Absolutely. And when we filled in our organizers, you filled in the what you see, the observations, utilizing these techniques that are all part of the author's craft. The second essential question is what principles outlined in the Constitution align or are in opposition to the artist's message. Since we're really looking for what the artist's message is in this painting, we're going to keep coming back to this question. What would this artist think about the Constitution? What would he be in favor of and what would he be against? And at the end of this activity, you're going to be answering that question in your final written piece. How did the artist's purpose for creating the painting impact the overall message? Who can remember when we read that passage about the painting, why Christie made this painting to start off with? Anyone remember? He was asked to make it, and it was placed in Washington, D.C. Do you remember why?
I think it was to represent what happened that day.
Okay. And it was for a celebration of something. Do you remember?
The 50th anniversary of the Constitution.
The 50th?
I thought it was the 100th.
150th anniversary of the Constitution. So remember our learning outcomes here. You will be able to cite specific evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources, identify aspects of a text that reveals an author's point of view or purpose. We're talking about not written text, but visual text. A painting can be considered text as well, so that's why when I say text, I'm talking about the painting in addition to the other resources that we've been working with. Cite textual evidence that most strongly supports analysis of what a text explicitly states and what is implied. When we're looking at our painting at the signing of the Constitution, something that is explicitly stated, even though we're not dealing with words, is an image that we could see directly, like George Washington standing on top of a platform. That's explicitly stated. But what can we infer about what we see using those context clues and our prior knowledge about George Washington? Why is he on that platform? What inferences can we make? Yes?
He's probably saying something important that everybody needs to hear.
Okay.
And people saw him as a hero, so they wanted him to be in front, and he was leading all of them.
Okay, and hang on to those ideas, because as we continue to evaluate and analyze this image, we're going to be bringing those ideas and piecing them together to get the overall message of this painting. The next thing I just wanted to do quickly is remind you of the task. Remember, you've all been selected as part of a group to determine whether or not this painting should be in Washington, D.C., whether it tells us the story of the Constitution and the signing of the Constitution at the convention, or if it should be replaced by something that is perhaps more accurate. So we have to consider the author's perspective when we're doing that. And also, the question that you're going to be looking at the end of this lesson and over the next couple of days as we do our assessment pieces is, should Christie's painting remain on display in Washington or should it be replaced? Now, we retrieve information in a few different ways. We've already made our observations. Today we're going to be making our inferences, but you also could ask questions. And I'm going to tell you about how that's going to play into today's lesson as we get into the final direction piece. Remember, we support all of our inferences with text, so that's nothing new. You have a lot of text in pieces right there on your desk, and you also have your Constitution in your Constitution packet. Okay? Any questions so far? No? All right. So what I wanted to do is just take a couple of seconds to go through a model of what you're going to be doing here today. Yesterday we took a look at this painting. We looked at all four of the quadrants and what we saw, and we filled in the what do you see column on our graphic organizer. We talked about William Jackson a little bit. We said he was wearing red, right? That made him stand out. We said that he was holding his hand up like this. We also said that he was holding something else in his other hand. We said that he was central in the image, and he was looking at us, right? He's right there in the center, and he's looking straight at the viewer. He's wearing the same color as the carpet, and the carpet appears to be up on a stage. So I'm wondering to myself whether or not that has meaning. This is the process and the thought process that you're going to go through as you evaluate and analyze the information presented in the text. The inferences, so this is that second column, all right, that says, what do you think it means? Since he was secretary, he probably wrote down the notes, and his writings are why we know what happened at the convention. That makes him central, just like his location, to the meeting. Let's take a look at the text excerpt. Who wants to read that for us? Christiana?
What specific textual evidence supports or refutes my inference? A secretary was hired to keep a record of the proceedings. His records were lost, but Madison sat close to the front, never missed a session, and copied down all of the speeches. James Madison has been called the father of the Constitution.
All right, so now we're going to go back to our inferences as we look at the different texts that are provided to us. And we're going to say, is our inference right? Or did the text evidence refute our inference? Who could tell us? Who could tell us here? Does the text evidence help us to support that his writings are why we know what happened at the convention? Lenny?
They aren't because the records were lost, and we only know what happened because of James Madison, because he wrote down everything.
Now look at your painting. Where's James Madison located? Where is he? Use the key if you need to.
He's number 3.
What inference can you make about James Madison and also support it with the text evidence?
Oh. Sorry.
Yes.
That even though he was the one who wrote wrote down the notes and is the only reason we know what happened, we didn't take him to be like as major for some reason, it seemed like, because he's like halfway covered up. And
Where is he in relation to the secretary?
right below him.
Okay.
So
But also pretty central, right?
Yeah, so he was maybe also important, but they were just thinking that the secretary was more important.
We'll have to go back to that, okay? And I have a second piece of text that will go back to that point that he's making right now. Look at the question. I said that good thinkers, good observers will ask questions along the way. My question I came up with is, did he object to anything at the document? Or in the document, and that's why he has his hand raised? Or is he raising his hand in agreement? Okay? Who wants to read that second text passage? Anyone other than Christiana? Go ahead, Monica.
In all, 39 delegates designated the Founding Fathers by a grateful nation, signed the Constitution in September 1787. But in fact, a 40th name appears on that historic document. That was William Jackson, the Secretary of the Convention, whose signature authenticated the results of the sessions in Philadelphia. Although Jackson lacked the delegates' right to debate and vote on the issues, he was clearly one of those who manifested a strong dissatisfaction with the weakness of the central government under the Articles of Confederation.
Is there anything in there that supports the inference that I made earlier? Is there anything in there that helps to answer my question? Was he raising his hand in agreement? Emma?
He was objecting to something in the document because it says that he was one of the ones who manifested a strong dissatisfaction with the weakness of the central government and the Articles of Confederation. So he's probably trying to object to make something stronger for them.
Okay, but listen to what you said. You actually supported the opposite perspective of what you just said. Okay, because what you said is that he wanted to get rid of the Articles of Confederation because he wanted it to be stronger. Okay, and he was dissatisfied with it, which helps to support that. What? Who can finish that?
The inference.
What?
The inference.
The inference? Okay. How so, though? Let me see some other hands. Come on, what are they? Yes.
That he's raising his hand to object or vote for something that's
What is
that
he in
inference?
agreement with?
In agreement with the Constitution?
Absolutely. He wants a strong central government, okay? And that's something that we're going to see coming through as we take a look at the document. There are some delegates that went to that convention and they wanted a strong central government. There's others that did not. We need to, as historians, we need to figure out what perspective Christie took and what message he's trying to portray to us by this artistic representation of that event. So the last thing I want to leave you with before you go ahead and start working are some directions that you could keep referring to as you're working today. First, we referred to the observations you made, in column 1 yesterday. So we already filled in column 1. Column 2 is begin drawing inferences based on your observations of the painting. Write these inferences in column 2. Okay, so what can you conclude? What inferences can you make about those observations? Then you're going to support or refute your inferences using specific text evidence. You have your Constitution packet, you have your delegate readings, you have several different resources out in front of you that you can refer to help you. And then the last piece is throughout this, you might find that you really need more information about some of these delegates, and you may have a question that you need answered. You're going to use your whiteboards and your dry erase markers, and you can go ahead and keep a list of those questions, information you need to know. And periodically I'm going to stop and say, okay, what questions do we have for the other students who represent different delegates? And then that student will give you some information, and you can go back to see if you could piece all the clues together, to see if you could bring meaning to this painting. Okay? Any questions? All right, so then you have all the resources. I'm going to be coming around and listening in and helping you out.
So, we all have different observations, though, right?
Yeah, we had different ones on this thing.
I think we're gonna start with that.
Well, want to do the first quadrant? Yeah.
Do we all have that it's brighter?
Yeah, I wrote that it was very bright. Same thing.
Okay. So we'll say what we think that means.
What do you think the purpose of the author is in making that section brighter than the other sections?
Because it had like the more important people kind of like.
Yeah, and it has like the secretary, and it had, well, the secretary was more in 2.
But if you made it a little bigger, this quadrant, it would have covered this whole corner at least, you know,
Yeah.
is the brighter
And it
area.
had like the foundation of our government with the Roman architecture in the back.
Good.
And then it also had the flag and the drums and the ribbon that George Washington is holding. And it has the delegates from North Carolina going up.
So I'm going to have you pause for just a second. The ribbon itself might be a clue to help us understand why he's in the spotlight here.
Yeah.
What do you think that means? What does the ribbon
I think
mean?
it could have been like some sort of award, like either for like the general, or it could be because they voted him important, or was that later?
It was later, but he was made the president of the convention, so that is a good observation.
So was that his role then? President of convention at the...
I remember we went over it yesterday, but I forget
Which
what
one?
we said. The ribbon.
Well, could it have something to do with the American Revolution?
Oh yeah, wasn't it like,
This is a general.
yeah.
Okay, and why do people win or get ribbons when they're in
When
war?
you're successful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like if you got hurt.
What are some of the characteristics that people display when they're in a war that are worthy of getting a ribbon?
Leadership?
Courage.
All of those things, okay? So now keep that in mind. If that's the message that the ribbon portrays, then why might there be a spotlight? Why might there be light in the direction of George Washington? Talk about it.
Okay. What do you think it means? Because George Washington is there and
Establishing government after the war, that he should be larger and like the light is focused on him.
Did you notice that the other quadrants, how they look in comparison to that one?
Well, they're a lot darker.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like because these these seem more shut than the other ones, and so the sunlight's coming in on this particular.
And only this part is darker.
Remember
And
when
this
we?
Well, like this
So
part is like
It's
pitch
still
black
in
here,
it. Yeah.
and then this part is dark. Even though there's a chandelier here that isn't lit.
What do you think that means?
Well, the chandelier has candles in it, so that means it has the ability to be lit, but no one lit it. So they went into this convention with a light not on, even
we
though
know
it could
about
be
that?
lit.
Do we know?
That it
What role
wasn't on.
does the artist play in the conclusions that we're drawing right now? Do we know if that chandelier was lit?
Well, we can't tell from here, but from what the artist said would have drawn that the chandelier would be on, he would have drawn some sort of miniature flame above these candles to show that it was on, and it would have put more light on the subject out here.
So did the artist make an intentional choice, perhaps?
Yes.
What might be the message of having the chandelier not lit in that corner?
That these people weren't as important as George Washington, or they didn't play as an important role, or these are the people who disagreed for signing this.
Good. Now, keep in mind the windows. What kind of meeting was this?
A meeting in the hot summer.
In the hot summer. And remember when we read in the textbook? Remember in chapter 36? It gave us specific information about what this meeting was supposed to be like, the atmosphere of the meeting.
It's supposed to be a secret.
So hush hush.
Yeah, it was a secret. Is there anything about this image that doesn't seem to fit with that idea of being a secret?
The open windows.
Yeah.
So what might be the message that the artist is trying to portray to us by...
That they didn't care, and they didn't care that they were about to start a rebellion.
Were they starting a rebellion?
Well, no, not necessarily a rebellion, but like continuing on from something that they didn't necessarily like to make it better.
Why was it a secret anyways?
Because they didn't want anyone else to know,
Know what?
besides about what they were doing. It
Why
was
didn't
just
they
kept
want
to these
anyone
guys.
else to know. Malcolm, do you remember?
I can't say I do.
Have you ever told someone something?
Yeah.
Are we fearful sometimes of how many people we give information to?
I guess so, yeah.
So how could that relate to...
They must not have wanted the wrong people to hear it.
And there would have been so many people who would have disagreed over it, and so if the whole, all of the colonies knew what was going on and the different ideas that were being passed around, they could have had a lot of conflicting
Now,
opinions.
what
Like
just
the
ran through my
anti-federal.
head was that it could be either options, like they left the window open to look like it was something that wasn't secret, and they were just like signing this random paper, and it didn't mean anything to anyone else, so they could have left it like that to realize that, to make it so that no one else thought it was suspicious. If the curtains were closed, they would have seen suspiciousness. Like, so if the curtains were closed to the building and they're normally open, you're like, what's going on in there?
Could
And
it
then-
mean something for the curtains to now be open? Maybe, let's just assume that maybe they were closed. What could the meaning be that now they're open?
Maybe like the meeting's drawing to an end and that they're almost ready to present it to like the public and the colonies and
That's a really good conclusion. As you go through each one, go to your delegate readings to see if there's anything that can help you to understand the placement of the individuals in this picture. Okay?
Okay, you have George Washington, right?
Yeah, I have George
The
Washington.
current time?
Which one are we on?
Two.
Maybe the chandelier connects to like a current time period when the artist painted the picture.
How about those people in this area that are raising their hands? You seem to find them suspicious, and that's why you
Like they're
noted
trying
them.
to get an opportunity to speak, but they can't. Or like they had
Do we
good
know who
ideas
they
that
are?
weren't recognized.
Number 8, so that would be...
They're all from South Carolina.
They're all from South Carolina. Is there anything significant about South Carolina, perhaps?
Did anyone have anyone from South Carolina here?
No. So,
Do you think there might be a question that we need to write
Yeah.
down on our whiteboards at this point?
South is South.
Let's think.
what's the significance of South Carolina? Like, almost what role did they play?
That's the question. Good.
We'll say that.
So what questions do you have so far?
Oh, well, just, what is the, I forgot the word ribbon. Would have been helpful.
So which one are you on?
We're just kind of jumping around here. So we were just talking about why we think lots of the people's faces are covered, and we said it might have been because if they didn't take as much part, in like the talking part, so they didn't need to be up to the front as much because they didn't really do anything.
So how did the author or the artist in this case use his craft?
He used lighting with an emphasis on certain people that he wanted to be more seen, and then
Like George Washington.
yeah, like
So be specific using what you just told me. You said that the arms were placed out in a position intentionally. So how then did the artist use his craft? You talked about prominence before. You talked about some people being more important than other people. How is that connected to the arms being out?
Because maybe like the people that are being blocked by the arms, like no one really, they're not like famous for the thing. Like when you think of the scene at the conservation, you don't hear about them. You hear about like Washington and Ben Franklin.
And what do we notice of now? That was a really good point because you said we don't hear about those people who are covered, but we hear about Washington and we hear about Franklin. What do we notice about them?
They're like out in the open, like
They look kind of brighter almost against the darker background.
their faces.
What about the numbering? Did we have any conclusions or inferences about the numbering?
It's almost like in order of importance.
Yeah, that's
How so?
George Washington, he's the father of our country.
He's kind of like one of the leaders. So we thought, well, he's one of the people that more people know about or that you hear about more often.
Like this guy over here, 39. You can see only the top of his head, and he's the last person.
And nobody really
Jacob Brown. Is that what? Even when he was in
Can you find someone that may? How about this guy? 20. Where's he located? Does that fit with your theory? Your theory?
He doesn't really.
he doesn't really talk much either. I guess he doesn't.
Does anyone have Jennifer here?
I do.
Okay. Why does he have his back to us, and why is he so prominent when he's number 20?
We talked about how his back turned towards us. We said how he doesn't really talk much on his own, but he helps back up James Madison. So we talked about like he has his back turned, so it's kind of like the "I got your back" kind of thing. So we kind of said something like that.
Interesting. Let's see if we could keep that in mind as we're looking at some of the others. What evidence from the text helps us support our understanding of that individual? Okay, so keep going back to your delegate readings to help you understand. You might even want to, at this point, see where your people are located and how that connects to some of the inferences that you've been making. Okay? How are we doing here?
We're starting this one.
Because we skipped this one, we had no idea
We were having trouble with Ben and Alexander.
Okay. Does anyone in here have Alexander Hamilton or Ben Franklin?
I have John Dickinson, so.
No, I have James.
What is it that we're stuck on when it comes to Alexander Hamilton and Ben Franklin?
We don't know why Ben's friend is looking at the picture, and then we don't know why he's like.
Do you have any questions that you can ask for the person who has Ben Franklin that he or she can go to the text to help us support our questions?
Yeah, like what were the major roles impact on it?
So you want to know what Ben Franklin's impact was on the Constitution?
Yeah,
The creation or the signing? Both. Okay, write the question down on your whiteboard so when we get to that point, you can ask that question.
Do you have some extra markers?
Yeah, they're right in the packet.
Lunch on that.
Don't go anywhere.
That's what his importance
Which
was.
one are we on now?
They're saying that the sitting people were more comfortable. That my person is one of the people who was sitting, and he was a Federalist, so he was happy with the Constitution and what was going to happen.
Yeah. Who is he?
No, you notice that he's a Federalist. What is a Federalist?
Don't they want the Constitution? Because the water can't
Okay. Is there anyone else we know of that was a Federalist? Okay. Anyone? No. Well, he did for his own government, right? Remember when we looked at the two different groups of quotes last week? There were some people that were Federalists and some that were anti-Federalists. Do you remember any of the people that fell into either?
I'm just gonna check my guy.
Firecrackers were anti-Federalists.
The firebrands were it's close. They're still firecrackers, right? So it was close. Yeah, they were the anti-Federalists because they didn't believe that giving the power away from the states was a good idea. Okay. Now, where is your person regarding the numbering on this key?
That's me and Chris.
Quorum.
My person is 22.
I'm pretty sure I'm 13.
Now, would you say that your people are prominent in this image or not?
He looks. Mine's the guy who's
He
looking
looks to be
away. He's down
smiling.
here.
Was there anything from your
He was
reading?
unhappy with parts of the Constitution.
My
He signed
guy-
it anyway. But I remember it was said he was like.
My guy has like people crowded around him.
I'm gonna have you pause for just a second so we can work with what she said right now. Annika said that her leader, her delegate, was unhappy with the Constitution but signed it anyways. And if we look at this image, this man right here, how is he portrayed? How did the author use his craft? What technique did he use? Remember our list of techniques?
Body language.
Yeah.
put his head
And
on
what about
backward?
the body language?
He kind of looks annoyed, like his hand is behind him, and he's like, he's not like Ben Franklin, who's all sitting back and
Did we ever go to talk about why these two look the way they do?
I think he might have been like whispering something
yeah,
to
who's
them.
that?
But what is he whispering? Go to your key. Go to your key. Find
That's Ben Franklin.
Let's ask about him.
You know what's weird? My guy's got like.
Oh, the Greek and Roman architecture?
Alright.
Is there anything else in this picture that really sticks out to you?
Well, once we pointed it out, the flags in the bottom, it looks like a drum.
I think that's just there's like a.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to have you say that again. What was that?
I'm not. I feel like it's just there, kind of almost as a prompt. Not like not entirely sure it could symbolize very much because we know that it's the colonies coming together to like write the Constitution and form our government. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure how much that could symbolize.
When you take a look at this, you notice that there are several flags, right? Mm-hmm. Would it be different if there was only one flag pictured there? Or do you think the several flags pictured is
almost
some
looks
sort of
like,
intentional?
I'm wondering
The
what the
flags
other
probably
flags
mean
mean.
something, but I don't
Yeah.
know what they are.
Well,
I can only tell that that's
if
the
you-
whole United States.
If you remember from like in the auditorium, they have the American flag.
Who's sending kids to my classroom? What were you saying?
Oh, that this is the United States flag, and
That
these are
almost
other
looks like the
flags.
British flag, but
No, this is the United States.
I know.
Yeah, it's just newly made, but I don't know
That's
what
Turkey
these
flag.
ones
Sorry,
are. These
what was I
three right
saying?
here.
I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, you know how like in the auditorium they have the American flag and then the other
the
like
Connecticut flag.
yeah, Connecticut flag. So they might have like the different flags of the different states. Like how many states are these?
13.
There's people from all
there's
13
4
states.
flags.
But could they represent something else? What could they represent? Where is
Maybe-
this located?
Like
In
they
Pennsylvania.
well,
Okay.
maybe back then they had like a flag for like not
Well,
Union
let's go
Nation.
to what we said that
Who they
good
are there,
observers
too.
do. They observe, they make inferences, and they ask questions, okay? So what question can you write on your board that you need answered?
We don't have a marker.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Good.
Which one are we on?
3. We have
What do you notice about these two people? Who are they, first of all?
they're both from Connecticut.
They're both from Connecticut. Now, is it important that they're sitting at the table together?
I think so.
Why are they sitting and no one else is sitting?
Well, most people in that quadrant are sitting because they're like that's like they're relaxed. But we thought they were sitting just because of like the weather, because it was hot, and like when you're hot you don't feel like doing anything.
Could the artist have placed them sitting to reveal some sort of message? Yeah. Look at what they have here. What are they holding?
Paper.
And what's on the ground? So what significance might the paper they're holding and the shredded paper on the ground have?
Thought that the shredded paper could be that there's like a lot of conflict going on, and that there are some unimportant ideas or ideas that just weren't given the opportunity.
Okay. If you go back to your packets, so you're going back to that Constitution packet that you had, remember that we had a list of compromises. Is there anything from this text that would help to support us? The placement of these two gentlemen?
The Connecticut Compromise.
Okay, what about it?
Well, because they're both from Connecticut.
All right, they're both from Connecticut. So how does that explain the paper they're holding, the paper on the ground? What does it have to do with anything?
It was because of the population to, like, they wanted, Virginia wanted the number of representatives to be based on Yeah, they wanted the population to determine how many representatives you had, and then New Jersey wanted each state to have the same number.
So how many plans do we have?
How many what?
How many plans?
2.
2 at least, right? So New Jersey and Virginia plans. Now, what did they have to do as far as those 2 plans went? Everyone wasn't going to accept Virginia. Everyone wasn't going to accept New Jersey. So what did they have to do?
They had to compromise.
Hold on a second. What was it? Well, they could have voted. What else could they have done? What did you say? Compromise. And how could the concept of compromise relate to this image right here when we take a look at these 2 individuals? Why would the artist have placed paper ripped up on the ground? You told me there's paper there. Why? How does that link to the concept of what these 2 men are connected to, that Connecticut Compromise?
They combined plans. So, like, for compromise, they combine the plans.
So what could those pieces of paper on the ground be?
Both the separate plans.
Perhaps. Okay, we can definitely support that with the evidence from this text, because we know that there were 2 plans that were not accepted, that they needed to come up with a compromise, and maybe that's the one that they're holding in their hand there, right? Okay, keep on going, you're doing a good job. Make sure that you're going back to your delegate reading so and trying to understand why your individuals are pictured the way that they are.
Do you know what this is? I'm not sure if it's important or not, but I just am curious as to what the thing on the ground is.
It's very difficult for us to see that. There's also something here that's very difficult for us to see.
Some bugs.
It looks like fabric, doesn't it?
Almost
Could the
like
fabric have
dresses
some sort
on
of
things.
meaning? No, that would be interesting for us to explore. It's almost like it's an interesting fact versus an important fact.
But then it's like around Ben Franklin's chair, and he's just looking straight at us as if trying to tell us something.
Okay, what might he be trying to tell us? Does anyone here have Benjamin Franklin?
Yeah.
Okay, going to your Ben Franklin reading, is there anything to help us understand why Ben Franklin is sitting so relaxed in that chair, why he has a cane, why there's fabric next to him, why there's books under him? Can you help us to figure that out?
He was energetic and tireless. So that's kind of contradicting why he's in a
And
chair.
they're putting emphasis on him, even though, like, because I guess his name is more well known, like William Jackson. His name is more well known, even though he didn't really do as much as we kind of say he did, because all his records were lost.
Would, if we go to this text, this picture, and look at George Washington, what evidence supports that he was important?
George Washington? Oh yeah, the way he's standing, the way he's kind of like standing alone. On his
Okay,
own.
if you look at this, there's something about the secretary that connects here. Okay, and it has to do with that concept of color and why the artist chose to use a color.
The red.
Yeah, why the red?
It's brighter against all the darker colors.
Okay,
So it shows more emphasis on it.
why are what? Where do we see red carpets?
That's what we were pointing out. Like, it's the color of fame. You see them with the stars walking on them because it's, I don't know why they chose red, but when I think of anything like a red carpet, I think of walking with fame.
Now, why would they want us to believe that if the red does symbolize fame, why would we see the secretary as being famous? What important role did he play?
He recorded everything.
He wrote down the notes, but how do we know about the Constitution? Is it the secretary?
James Madison who had
Right, so that sort of doesn't
that's why-
support it. But he did something. What does the secretary do? What did he do from that last reading passage? Remember? So I'm going to go back so you can see the reading passage.
Supported a strong central government.
Maybe he's like the first person to support.
Oh, I said that they just take care at the bottom. Take a look at that again.
Oh, his signature authenticated the results of the sessions. So he signed. So that's why he was important, is because his signature authenticated.
Section.
As you go, yes.
Okay.
With what inferences can you make?
Okay, and also we knew that he was secretary because it said it on this paper.
Yeah.
So should we just write that in this section?
Yeah, he's well, I wrote that he's wearing white red in the center. He's in the central pivot, like a secretary in the center, trying to take notes. And
Now, I just want to pause for a second because if you look at what you said as an inference, you inferred that he was a secretary. But is it really an inference, or was that explicitly stated somewhere? It was stated for you, so it's not an inference when it's stated. An inference would be
Something he's like important.
right, okay? And what information helps you to know that he was important based on what you see?
he's in the center of the picture.
Okay.
He's in red.
See the difference between explicit versus implied information? We need to make sure that we're picking out the information that we're using the context clues. It's not specifically stated to us, but we can see that there is something important about this man. Okay?
Okay.
In a couple of minutes, I'm going to stop. If I could have your attention for just a minute.
And so then we could
Ladies,
make
gentlemen.
inferences for this.
I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, but I do want to give you a warning that in a couple of minutes, we're going to stop and I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you have about the delegates that you were not assigned. All right? So if it is Ben Franklin and you want to know why he has the cane or why he's pictured in the way that he is, then make sure you have a question directly stated on your board to be asked. We're going to go around and each group is going to get the opportunity to ask a question. Remember, these questions are meant to get more information so that you could use that text evidence that is provided by your peers to support your inferences. Okay? I'm going to give you about 2 more minutes. So if you haven't thought of a question just yet, come up with one that you really would like to know the answer to.
For inferencing, for Ben Franklin looking at us and as you see did, we could put that he's important because his face is like brighter than the rest of the people around him except for Alexander.
Which one?
Ben Franklin.
Ben Franklin?
Yeah, his face.
He's like staring at us.
You know, did you notice that there are several faces that are a little bit brighter than some of the others?
Yeah.
Did you look at those individuals now and go to your key? Is there any connection between those faces that are brighter and the keys themselves?
This guy
And
right
the
here is
kids.
brighter.
Yeah, is there any other questions we have?
8 is from South
Wait, what is her whole
Carolina.
name?
But we don't know exactly what a red carpet stood for back then, like what it meant to them.
Because we're dealing with a historical context too. Has the context changed over time? Have you noticed anything about? I think it was this group that told me that you thought the people who were at the top were more important.
Yeah.
Is there anything that connects them regarding their political views? Do you have any of these guys?
We have that one guy. He was the 8th, the 9th.
Is there possibly a question that's connected to that you might want to know?
Are they like the high?
Were they all
like
Federalists?
I don't know. That might be a question. Is anyone who has this? Maybe you want to ask them that question.
We were gonna ask about Alexander Hamilton.
What about him?
Like what were his views because he's like talking to Ben Franklin.
Okay.
And Ben Franklin is like very relaxed, except he's kind of on the edge of the chair.
So he seems like he might be a little upset with him.
Yeah, I don't exactly know, but it might just be because he's just sitting there and like he might want him to say something.
Interesting. So we'll have to see what the response.
It made him look like his clothes were like tight fitting too, like on his chest. Made him look a little fat almost, even.
So why does he look so fat? Is that your question?
Yeah.
I don't know if is that important, you think?
Maybe.
Or would that just be an interesting fact?
Maybe they were making.
George Washington.
Maybe it's to criticize him.
Okay, perhaps, you're right.
George Washington's
Alright,
buff
we're going to
calves.
stop now.
Wait, the North Carolina signing.
Let me give you an example of a question that has come up. I don't think anyone has this question written down, so I'm going to take the opportunity to say it. A lot of you, as I go around to your groups, keep on telling me, well, I think the numbering on Christie's key is in order of importance. But is there something that makes those people more important than others? So my question that I'm going to throw out there is, what are the political views of those top 10? What do they stand for? Are they Federalists? Are they anti-Federalists? Are there any conclusions we can draw based on what other information we know or from our readings? Okay, so that's the style of question that I'm looking for. I'm going to let this group go first, and you're going to ask a question. I want you to listen because I'm going to ask that you write down the question if it is related to your group. That way you'll have a couple minutes to go investigate it before you have to report back your answer. So what's your question? All right, pick the one you think is the most important to understanding.
Okay. We were. Wait, where is it?
So who is it regarding?
Okay.
Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
All right, who is Alexander Hamilton? Who is Hamilton? Okay.
Yeah. And we were wanting to know like what his point of view was on the thing and why he was talking to Ben Franklin like that, or well, whatever he was doing to Ben Franklin.
So what is his point of view? And why is he talking to Ben Franklin? Maybe even considering his relationship with Ben Franklin? All right. That group over there, what's one question you would like to have answered?
Why is Benjamin Franklin looking right at us?
So who is Ben Franklin? Just two. You have Ben's too?
Yeah.
So why is Ben Franklin looking at us? Why do you want to know the answer to that question?
Because it seems like he's trying. There's a message that's trying to be sent. Why the Christie made him look right at us, and he's in the front too. So
That's interesting because that goes back to what you were saying too, right? What is the question that your group has?
What role did South Carolina have during the signing of the Constitution?
Now, why do you want to know what role South Carolina had?
Because in the second quadrant, or like second and third, the people with their hands up are South Carolina people. Like they're the delegates from South Carolina. And it could like mean that they want to say something or that they're disagreeing about something.
Okay, who had a South Carolina delegate? All right, so did you write the question down? So what is their position? Is that what you said? Or their role at the convention? All right, this group, what was your question?
Our question is for George Washington. What is the ribbon for? and what does it mean?
Who had George Washington? Michael? All right, so the question is, what is George Washington's ribbon all about? Okay, so you're going to look to the text to find the answer, so write down the question. Why do you want to know that?
Yeah, because he's standing like up so proud and he's holding it out, like showing everyone. Like, what is it, like, what's the significance of it?
Can you make any inferences about that
I think
without
it's-
going to the text just yet?
I think he was a general, and so it might be a Purple Heart ribbon, or it might be a ribbon for leading America. Yeah, for leading the United States to victory or something like that.
So did you hear that, Michael? They're looking for validation that maybe it's a Purple Heart or some sort of reward from the battles. Okay, so maybe you can provide them the evidence for that, to support that, or refute it. How about this group?
We had a question about, his name is Daniel, and he's like facing his back to,
So number 20.
yeah, he's facing his back away, but he's not even looking at the stage. He's looking at all the people that are there to sign it. So we were wondering what's his relationship to the Constitution.
Okay. I'm actually going to let Amanda answer that because I think you already have the text evidence from your reading to support that, right? Because you know the answer to that one, all right?
Why is he facing like all
So
the
why does he
people?
have his back to us? Is there anything from the reading that might explain that?
Well, we were talking about
Hold on
why.
1 second with the papers, okay? A lot of rustling of the papers.
We were talking about why he might have his back turned towards us. He didn't really talk that much, and he didn't say much, but he backed up James Madison, and so we were thinking kind of like he has his back towards us, kind of like he's backing him up or something, and that's why his back's towards us. But,
Okay. And you could look to your text again to see if there's any additional support for that as well, all right? So you're going to go back and you're going to look, your group's going to work together to find an answer to the question, but you're also going to continue to evaluate. I'm going to stop in a few minutes, let you report your answers, okay? And I know that we're not going to finish this task completely today, so I want to stop and see what we think the message of this painting is so far. And then we'll come back to it and talk some more tomorrow, okay? So let's go and see if we can get an answer to those questions first. Go ahead.
I think it's like, I think he's looking at, I don't know
It
which
doesn't say anything about it.
Franklin's. It does. Are you showing us?
oh, isn't just like looking right at Madison?
Did they ask you any questions?
No.
No?
And the question that we asked,
She was talking about when she answered.
well, she was saying like he didn't talk, so maybe that's why he was looking at us because he like doesn't like public speaking or something.
Perhaps.
And then he was looking over towards that way, and maybe he was trying to. And then she said how he was backing up James Madison.
So what did the author use? What technique did he use in order
He
to...
literally showed his back.
Okay, so it's a literal interpretation of that. Do you understand that a little bit better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arturo, good job with helping her in explaining that, okay? Alright, so we're going to go back to continue to interpret using our evidence.
Okay. So the guy.
Can we find you a napkin somewhere? Do you think you'll make it? A couple more minutes?
It's all there.
So what question? Did you get asked a question?
No, I didn't.
Specific question. It was like a general question about.
Yeah, about South Carolina. The other guy that we had a question on, I don't know if anyone had him.
Okay, so if you don't have a question that was specifically asked to
It was
you,
like what were the views of South Carolina delegates, and I have one from South Carolina.
okay, so what was the view of the South Carolina delegate?
He was a Federalist,
Okay,
but he believed in the slaves, and he was a slave holder. And what does it mean by planter? Does that mean like he had to cotton plantation?
a plantation owner.
Yeah. So he had a plantation, and he was a slave owner, and
Of all of that information that you just said, what would be important for us to understand his role?
he believed in the Constitution.
Yes,
But
okay.
he didn't believe in getting rid of slavery.
So then, why might he be depicted in the way that he is?
Because even though he was like agreeing and everything, and he was likable and everything, he was really young, but he still.
Okay, if you look here too, he became a lieutenant, a nationalist. What does it mean to be a nationalist? I want you guys to talk about that for a minute.
I don't know.
Michael, do you have an answer for their question as you're drawing?
That's my illustration of the ribbon then.
On fire? The bomb.
You know how when you get a ribbon and there's a little ball?
So what's the answer to the question?
I don't know. I didn't find anything yet so far.
You're too busy drawing.
We all decided that we don't think it's a war medal because it seemed almost strange that he's just standing there holding like a medal of honor.
That'd be like going to your 8th grade graduation holding your soccer ribbon. Like what? No.
Now we keep on going back to this. I keep going with this group to the same thing. Same question. Is it necessarily reality, or is it the author's or artist's interpretation?
Well, if it's the artist's interpretation, then we're definitely not going to know what it is.
If that man who drew the picture of President Obama at a speech, do you think the people in the audience were actually in chains and there was really a rooster?
No. And the missing leg? No.
Okay, so now I want you to think about this. Could it be the artist using a technique here, using his craft rather than...
I'd find it rather interesting if these authors were doing the same technique. Can they erase your place? I have to erase my beautiful word. I'd find it rather strange that these authors or artists coincidentally use the same techniques for something.
What do you mean?
But we said that one of our artists' craft techniques was to place items.
So like if you're telling me the rooster is the same thing as the ribbon, or the ribbon's the same thing as the rooster.
No, people have been using symbols in paintings.
Okay, so what is it a symbol for? I think that she's on to something
Yeah,
here.
but this is a very small symbol, and if this painting were huge, you wouldn't even
I know,
notice
but like
that.
I don't think the
Alright,
focus of the
so
whole
let's
thing
see if
is
we
George
can
Washington's
answer
medal
those
that he's holding.
questions
It's
with
just
some
small
evidence.
little bits of symbolism, like
The rooster was a very good symbol.
a little.
About symbolism. What I want you to do is see if you can answer those questions. Samantha, or sorry, not Samantha, my goodness, did I say that on camera? Yeah. Edit, cut. Alright. Kristen had the answer to one of the questions about South Carolina. And what do you think is the answer? What was the question that was posed to you?
What were the views and the role of the South Carolina delegates? And I had Charles Pinckney, I think that's how you say it. Pinckney. And he was just a very major political person. He was always in politics. And he was a Federalist, but he also owned a plantation, and he was a slaveholder. So he believed in slaves.
Now, where was he? You guys told me that 1 is most important and 39 or 40 is least important. Where was your individual?
He's 9.
9, okay. Who had Hamilton? Hamilton. What political view? This goes back to the question I posed to you. What political view was Hamilton? Anyone remember when we were looking at the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist quotes, which side was Hamilton on? The Anti-Federalist had Patrick Henry, remember the firebrands? Patrick Henry, Sam Adams. Was Hamilton on that side, or was he on the other side with the Federalists?
Wait, are these?
Look to your text, Mike. We'll give her a second. Who had another question that they had to answer? Yes.
We'll wait to, what's, Daniel St. Thomas, what's his relationship with some of the other delegates?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really talk much about it in his text, but except for his relationship with James Madison. So we looked at the painting, and it kind of looked like when he was looking at James Madison. So we kind of saw like there was like a connection between like where he was looking and where James Madison was placed, and the connection between them. doesn't think that could have meant, you know, with his back turned towards us and everything, that he was backed up James Madison.
Good, and you know what? There was actually another relationship that we kept on going back to, and that was the relationship between Ben Franklin and Hamilton. Okay, is there a connection between Ben Franklin and Hamilton?
I didn't find one in Ben Franklin's, but I also had the question why Ben Franklin was staring at the camera.
Why?
Or the viewer. And to me, he kind of looks annoyed in the painting. Like, he kind of looks, yeah. So, he didn't, it says here, at the Constitutional Convention, though he did not approve of many aspects of the finished document and was hampered by his age and ill health, he missed few, if any, sessions. So, he could, since it says that he didn't approve of many aspects of the finished document, I think that could be him just like looking at the viewer being, why are they doing this?
Now that information, did anyone else find that interesting? She read about his health. Could that help us to understand anything else that we see in this text, this painting? Yes.
The cane.
The cane, what else? Yes.
He's slouched over, he's sitting down.
He's sitting down, okay? So sometimes we need to utilize the text to help us understand what's happening in the painting. What I want you to do at this point is I want you to, as a group, I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to determine so far what you think the message of this artist is. What message is this painting supposed to portray to us, right?
I think it could mean, I don't know, it's supposed to show like who the leaders are and like who were the main people who decided about it.
I think the message might have been about some of the different delegates and their kind of their standpoints and their viewpoints on the different aspects and like their relationships with each other, and not only like how they're, because we all know that they signed it, but maybe that their different viewpoints, like they said about Ben Franklin, like he didn't really agree with every aspect of it, even though he went to every session. So it could have been a little bit about that.
And what do we know about the Constitution itself? Was it something that everybody initially all agreed on?
No.
What did it take in order to get to that?
Compromise.
Okay, does this picture show compromise in any way? Right?
I'd say so. Because there are people objecting.
We're average citizens, but we always have a way to talk to each other and to put our...
They are conflicting, but
Like pointing and yelling and disagreeing.
yeah, but in like a
Snapshotted way.
Was it good in this case for them to disagree?
yeah.
How so?
Because if they had just gone with almost like the rough draft, and if there weren't conflicting opinions, that the document wouldn't have been as strong as it was. But when they argued and compromised, it would have been better for two different sides, because there are two different sides to every opinion, and so it helped make it like stronger and almost like better balanced.
All right, I hear some good messages, and I know that we're not finished, but the direction we're going with this is trying to determine whether the message of this piece, the artist's message, is worthy enough to have this painting displayed in Washington, D.C. So far, what do you think the message is? Who wants to share? I heard some really good ideas out there. I told you I was going to call on you. Yes.
So we thought that it had a message about compromise, and because there's some people like objecting still, but it seems like they're all trying to kind of settle it out, and they have a leader, so it's kind of like they're trying to make compromise between everybody. And
there's even people already signing it, so there's people who are happy about it, and then there's people that later on know that they're going to sign it, but looks like they're unhappy with it. And so George Washington is basically saying, I'm a leader, I did this, look guys, I even got a ribbon for it, I can be a leader, and trying to compromise with them, trying to convince them that he can.
Okay, and we kept on going back to this with that ribbon, whether or not the ribbon is actually, George Washington actually stood there with his ribbon, or if that was a technique, an artistic choice, okay? Anyone else want to talk about perhaps what is the overall political message of this painting? Yes.
We thought that it's kind of like, even though there's like the separate states all over, people, they can still come together and the government is still one.
And what kind of government does this represent?
Federalism.
And how do, okay, she said federalism. How does it represent federalism? What do we notice? Yes.
That there's one standing above all of them, and then there's just the average people sitting everywhere else and standing and trying to talk to him.
Okay, so as we go forward with this, we're going to start looking at those most prominent people and what political message those people are trying to represent. Okay? Any questions before we're done here?